There's something that distinguishes the Adirondacks even more than our beautiful mountains. It's our amazingly clear, fresh, abundant water. There are more than 3,000 lakes and ponds throughout the park, many connected by wild and scenic rivers. We fish, we boat, we swim in them. They also supply water to towns, to prisons, golf courses, ski centers, and industrial sites. Any guesses on who uses the most water? You'll find out on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And the Devlin Inn and Suites, Lake Placid, welcoming families, athletes, and groups to the Olympic Village, offering Adirondack mountain views and dog-friendly accommodations. TheDevlinNY.com.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Wednesday, March 19th. First up, Governor Kathy Hochul wants new restrictions on wearing masks in public. John Campbell reports for the New York Public News Network that she's pushing lawmakers to include at least a partial mask ban in the state budget.
Lawmakers tell WNYC that the governor has revived the issue in recent budget negotiations. That's after she first talked about it last year. The governor says it's a matter of public safety.
Think about a bank robber walks in, their face is covered. Someone assaults someone on the subway. They can get away with it despite the fact that we have cameras because they are masked.
Some progressives and civil liberties advocates are opposed. They've raised issues about health concerns and discriminatory enforcement. The governor says she supports exceptions for medical and religious reasons. In Albany, I'm John Campbell for the New York Public News Network.
One of the oldest newspapers in the country is in central New York, and last week it published its final edition. After 157 years of providing local news coverage to the greater Cortland area, the Cortland Standard has filed for bankruptcy. The loss draws more attention to local news deserts across New York and nationwide, where communities that learned who was born, who died, and what happened in between no longer have a reliable source of news. Ellen Abbott reports for the New York Public News Network.
It was 2 years after the end of the Civil War when the Cortland Standard printed its first edition, featuring recipes for spring peas, a profile of Civil War generals, a plea against smoking, and an ode to a local creek. It printed its final edition this week, citing declining readership and increasing costs. The headline on that last edition, "Goodbye Cortland and Godspeed." Joel Kaplan, a journalism professor at Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Journalism, calls it a sad day.
Newspapers like that are part of the community. And when they go, I think a piece of the community dies with it.
Publisher Evan Geibel was part of the fifth generation of the family that bought the paper back in 1876. In a letter to readers, he noted the paper was hoping to avoid becoming one of the 2 newspapers a week in this country that goes out of business by shifting printing out of town, making plans to host community events, and producing more video for their website. But as print readership continued to decline and advertisers spent their money in online marketing, Geibel wrote he couldn't afford to publish the paper anymore. Among the cost increases for software and utilities the paper coped with, there was also an expected 25% tariff on newsprint. Kaplan suggests that could have been the final nail in the coffin.
80 to 90%, I think, of the newsprint that's produced is produced in Canada. So they were just on the edge anyways, and I think this put them over the top. And I don't think they saw a way forward from this.
Kaplan says other communities have risen from news deserts by creating their own publications, sometimes with the help of organizations that provide grants and other supports for local journalism. But for now, those folks used to catching up on local happenings from their trusted afternoon paper.
Unless you have very civic-minded people in that community, you might be out of luck. And all you can do is, it goes back to the Pony Express days where you're getting your news from your neighbor or for someone coming by or letting you know what's going on, or from social media.
The Cortland Standard was the second oldest family-owned newspaper in New York State. In Syracuse, I'm Ellen Abbott for the New York Public News Network.
Any place in the Adirondacks that can pump 100,000 gallons a day or more is required to get a permit from the DEC. There are about 100 of those permits right now in the park. Recent reporting from the Adirondack Explorer looks at who uses the most water and how a changing climate is impacting that use. Emily Russell spoke with the Explorer's Zachary Matson about his reporting.
So let's talk about the biggest water user in the Adirondack Park. That's the paper mill in Ticonderoga, known kind of locally as International Paper. How much are they using, and can you kind of put it into context compared to all the other water users in the Adirondacks?
Yeah, so, a few years ago, it sort of spun off into this new company called Sylvamo, and they have, a handful of paper mills in the U.S. and some other countries as well, and they are the biggest user by far in the park, and, they, in 2022, had pumped about 5.6 billion gallons of water for their industrial paper production. And, really when you look back 15 years of this data, they're consistently about half of all of the water use in the park. So, an interesting comparison is the public water supplies. So we're talking about the village of Lake George, their drinking water, Lake Placid, the drinking water you get when you turn on a tap in Saranac Lake or any of these, towns that have these public water systems. Combined, they use about 3.7 billion gallons of water. That's to service 65,000 residents and all of the visitors who come to the park. So about 30% less goes to, all that public drinking water is what the paper mill is using.
And the next biggest water user that you found was the Adirondack Fish Hatchery near Lake Clear. What are they using that water for, and why is it so important to be pumping so much water in and out of that fish hatchery?
So to raise these fish in this environment, you do need this constant stream of fresh water that, if it just sits there, it isn't a good environment you can't just fill a tank, put fish in it and, feed them and let them grow for a couple of years. You've got to constantly cycle that water through so that it stays oxygenated and fresh for the fish. And so, basically they told me, I visited, that the water moves from, once it's pumped into the facility, it cycles through in about 3 hours and then is leaving. So they have this constant stream of water coming in, moving through these different tanks and holding ponds, and then cycling out. And this is so that they can have this healthy environment to keep any diseases at bay, to have these fish thrive. That hatchery, which is the only state-run hatchery in the park, they produce all of the Atlantic salmon that are stocked, in the park and really throughout the state, as well as these endangered round whitefish. So they're raising fish that are really important for conservation efforts to maintain this native fishery for anglers. And they just need this constant stream of fresh water, and it comes in, and a few hours later it's exiting and going down Hatchery Brook and into Upper Saranac Lake.
Who are the other big water users in the Adirondacks that you were looking at?
Yeah, so after, the paper mill and the public drinking supplies and the hatchery, snowmaking at Orta facilities is really the next sort of biggest, slice of this water use. Combined in 2022, about 800 million gallons of water were withdrawn in order to produce artificial snow for Whiteface and Core Mountain. And, that's, again, really they see this as this very critical resource in order to provide skiers with the conditions that they want in order to keep this, aspect of the tourism industry thriving. They have to produce fake snow, and that requires a lot of water. They, at Whiteface can pump up to 6,000 gallons of water a minute and put that into snow that covers the mountain for our skiers.
That was Zachary Matson from the Adirondack Explorer speaking with Emily Russell. You can find a link to Matson's reporting at our website, ncpr.org. We have more news there all the time as well, of course, ncpr.org. Music today by Danny Thomas of Canton and Muskox of Ottawa. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.